Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and the Sergeant-at-Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, there is a privilege report at the desk. So I'm asking the Secretary to read the report.
Senator Dietzick from the Subcommittee on Conference Committees recommends that the following senators be, and they hereby are, appointed as a conference committee on House File number 1370. Senators May Quaid, Klein, and Lucero. Senator Dietzick moves the foregoing appointments be approved.
Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, remaining under the order of business of motions and resolutions, we will revert to the fifth order of business, reports of committees. Members, there's a committee report to read at the desk. The Secretary will read the report.
Senator Latz from the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety, to which was referred House File number 402, a bill for an act relating to health, establishing requirements for certain healthcare entity transactions. Reports the same back with the recommendation that the bill be amended as follows. And when so amended, the bill do pass and be re-referred to the Committee on Finance. Pursuant to Joint Rule 2.03, the bill was referred to the Committee on Rules and Administration.
Please note, as the Secretary indicated, pursuant to Joint Rules 2.03, the bill was referred to the Committee on Rules and Administration, and no action is required. Remaining under the order of business and motions and resolutions, Senator Putnam, for your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the foregoing recommendations and conference committee report on Senate File 1955 be now adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the conference committee.
Senator Putnam moved that the foregoing recommendations and conference committee report for Senate File number 1955 be now adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the conference committee. Senator Putnam, to that motion, please explain.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I rise today to present before you the conference committee report from the Committee on Agriculture, Broadband, and Rural Development. Members, this bill left this House, left this body with 58 votes. It should get 59 today. The bill is incredibly strong, balanced, and thoughtful. I'd like to, if I may, just tell you a little bit about what's still in it and a little bit about what we added to it. Members, we are able to invest in a grain indemnity fund causing no consternation and difficulty for farmers around the state of Minnesota. We have created an opportunity for their stability and their comfort for their incredibly difficult and volatile industry. Members, by passing this bill, we are going to change the lives of many, many farmers who in prior years risked total bankruptcy and the ruining of their livelihoods. Members, by your vote today, you make that not happen. Members, we also invested $4 million in the Dairy with an I program. For the first time in the history of the state of Minnesota, we have fewer than 2,000 dairy farms. The Dairy with an I program allows some stability, some certainty, some financial structure for all the dairy farms throughout the state of Minnesota. This is how we preserve the small dairy farm. When you vote for this bill, you vote for small dairy farms. We're putting over $1 million in soil health grants. Members, farmers want to be green. They want to be sustainable. We are giving them the resources to do that today when we vote. We're putting an additional almost $2 million into the Forever Green initiative and continuous living cover, working for a more sustainable future for Minnesota farmers through science, technology, and all the stuff that we've been able to do at the University of Minnesota. And we're also, something I'm especially proud of, making a tremendous investment in undoing the bottleneck in small meat processing plants that has stopped our economy throughout the state of Minnesota for too long. We will be standing up small businesses, creating new small businesses in local communities to process meat for those communities. This is another great thing that this bill is. All these things are things that we did in the Senate. And one more thing I want to point out, we were also able to include Senator Rasmussen's initiative for below-cost dairy. Because of Senator Rasmussen and because of the bipartisan nature of the work in agriculture, every month in Minnesota will be Dairy Month. So thank you for your work, Senator Rasmussen, and I was proud to fight for your initiative and to make sure that it was in this bill. Now, we also took on some stuff from the other body. And some of those things, I think, could use a little bit of explanation so that we would understand just how good they are. One of those is a $4 million investment in urban and youth agriculture. Now, you see that on the spreadsheet. You might see that and maybe have a little bit of confusion. All that does is it gives grants and resources to communities throughout the state of Minnesota in order to inspire greater youth engagement in agriculture. This is an education provision to start up community farms, to help young people learn more about where their food comes from and become inspired to go into any number of the careers that are waiting for them in Minnesota agriculture today. Now, I said this was a whole state thing. Urban is defined in this bill as 5,000 people, a town of 5,000 people. In past years, grants from this program have gone to Minneapolis, and they've gone to the big city of Bemidji. Members, this bill helps young people become more involved in agriculture, but it also undoes the simple dichotomy that we sometimes operate with, that agriculture is a greater Minnesota, or we have these divisions between the cities and greater Minnesota. This bill, this provision in this bill, helps remedy that artificial division. We also have a great deal of funding going into the Farm to School program that helps farmers get their produce to kids in our public schools. There is no reason why a kid in a school in Foley should get corn from Iowa, or anything from Iowa, for that matter. This is an opportunity to build those closer relationships between our local farms and our schools where our kids are eating, with healthier food and new economic opportunities for those who are growing it. Members, that's a very basic, high-level take on this bill. I mentioned a couple things in the other body and a couple things that we maintained, that we fought for, that we kept in this bill. Members, this is a good, thoughtful, balanced bill. When you vote for this bill, you are voting for Minnesota's farmers. You are voting for a more sustainable future for agriculture in the state of Minnesota.
Any other questions or discussion on Senate File 1955 as amended by the Conference Committee? Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Chair Putnam for fighting for the Senate position on the provision that will now make every month Dairy Month here in the state of Minnesota and allow for cheaper dairy products for Minnesotans, which will help consumers at the grocery store and help our Minnesota dairy farmers. I really appreciate him working in a bipartisan way to get that provision done this year and in the Conference Committee report.
Any additional discussion on Senate File 1955? Senator Westrom.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, thank you, Chair Putnam, for the relationship we've been able to work on ag issues and rural broadband, and the Senate bill that we were able to send out of here with a strong vote. I know you had a House bill that was not as ag-friendly or rural Minnesota-friendly, and so I know those are tough negotiations. And so I want to thank you for fighting as much as you could for the Senate positions. But members, I do want to comment on some of the good things in this bill, but a few things that are really problematic, and just highlight that. I know we have a few days left. We could try to send it back. I realize that might not be a possible outcome, but I'll talk about that in just a little bit. The investment we're making in bio-incentives and bio-infrastructure, the meat processing grants, the $100 million to rural broadband, members, those are good things. We've worked together bipartisanly to get that accomplished. Our Ag Committee put a strong bill together for those aspects of rural Minnesota that are so important. And so, Senator Putnam, I do want to thank you for that we've been able to work with you on that. What was missing and not in the Senate bill, and were some pretty big policy changes or concerns to ag groups and farmers in our districts across rural Minnesota was some of the ban language that was in the House bill. One was on treated seeds that would have really impacted how most farming and farmers operate part of their farms today, with seed treatments that allow them to have better pest control, better weed control, time-released fertilizers that help them with fertilizers that can be released over weeks instead of all at once. Those are advances in agriculture that have allowed our farmers to become more efficient, more cost-effective, and really improved the yields and the operations and the overall bottom line for farmers. And it was very important that we stop that assault on agriculture and farmers that was in the House bill. And that we accomplished in conference committee. So I want to thank Chair Putnam for that and for fighting on behalf of language to ban PFAS. And this becomes a huge issue. And as we've dug into this issue, I think there's a lot more we still don't know in the sense of products that many of us probably use on a daily basis in our lives, your constituents use. And the House has been on an assault and on a tangent to ban these things without knowing other alternatives that are reasonably available in the marketplace. And that is an irresponsible approach when you don't know what's going to replace what has been around since the 50s or before, as we heard in conference committee testimony. This is just an issue that does need to be examined much more thoroughly and not cast such a wide net. And this language that's in here will have a ban starting in 2032 of PFAS and actually starting in 2026 on products, unless that's unavoidable or there's no alternative. But members, that shifts the burden and this issue to the Commissioner of Agriculture solely. We don't know who the commissioner in 2026 or 2032 might be. But it leaves it to that one person instead of leaving it in the legislative body, which we can have a voice of 201 legislators speaking up for constituents with alternatives, with concerns, with the effects that it will have on daily lives. And so, members, that is a big concern that I wish we could have found better language. I know, Chair Putnam, you worked very hard on trying to find a language that the House would agree to. I think they need to step back and bring us the alternatives before we're going to just sign on to a ban. And I know originally we were talking 2032 is kind of when the ban would come into place. That's close to 10 years out. We all know how fast 10 years goes by, but at least it's not next year or this summer. But 2 nights ago, I took a keen interest in the newscast, watching some of the groups celebrating and some of the DFL leaders in the House bragging about this ban of PFAS by 2026. And so while the bill has some discretion up to 2032, they are intending to ban these within the next 3 years. And that is concerning. That is concerning to farmers, that is concerning to manufacturers, and that is concerning to consumers that use these products. Again, they've been around for decades. Now, we're all for trying to improve products if you can find a better alternative, something that's reasonable, similarly cost-effective, or maybe does a better job. There's lots of innovation that will come along. But for us to outright ban this, something that is used in every one of our daily lives, and many times most of us don't even know it's in a product. We just don't know what products are made of because that's how the product works. And the ag groups, the seed dealers, retailers have come to us over and over and said, we don't know some of the alternatives to make this product, and so the alternative is going to be going without it, changing our daily lives, or making things unavailable to consumers that we don't even know the unintended consequence of this. And so that I raise as a pretty big concern, members, to have a ban come through like this in 2026, as some of the groups are promoting heavily in the newscasts in the last couple of days. That's what they're talking about. Another area of concern, and Chair Putnam and I have talked about this, there's a fee increase in here for the Department of Ag Commissioner to raise on fertilizer, going from 39 cents a ton to up to 70 cents a ton, with the discretion of that increase again being up to the commissioner, not being set by the legislature, which historically has been set when a fee needs to be increased. We all are reluctant to do that, but when the need is there, that's been a legislative prerogative and should be a legislative prerogative. Again, better than a direct fee increase right now if there's one needed, but I think we should own up to that. Let's not just leave fee increases out there for commissioners to raise whenever they want to. The legislature should be part of that process. And so that is one aspect. Another aspect I want to just raise concern for members to know about. Last point of concern, significant concern, is the change to the Board of Animal Health. This is a change that many have been trying to politicize this board, change it, the effectiveness and the focus that they've had for livestock and disease. And so this bill is better than many of the proposals that have come out of the House and some proposals that have come into the Senate. But it is getting rid of one more livestock producer on the board. It is adding another veterinarian that just focuses on or has a primary practice and expertise with small companion animals. And so I'm concerned about the direction, although I will concur that it is better than the alternatives of other ways that they were trying to politicize this board and turn it into an activist board as opposed to a real board that focuses on disease, stopping it, curing it, doing what we want, which is to minimize the risk and the damage to farmers and to livestock throughout our state. And we want the Board of Animal Health to keep their reputation, which for decades they have been well respected. They have been focused on the diseases as they hit our state or the bordering states, as they continue to monitor and advise and set policy for how to have a strong livestock operation in our state, free from diseases or an ability to control diseases and outbreaks. And so as we start adding to this now a seventh member, the House insisted last year on adding a sixth member, and it continues to water down this board as we go away from livestock producers and veterinarians solely as the focus of the board membership. And so, members, probably the least of the three concerns I've raised is this issue. I realize it's a compromise, but it is a concerning direction that the House continues to try to take us in diluting the purpose and the reputation and what this board was put in place for and what they've had such a strong record of doing over the decades for our agriculture and our farmers, and the keeping disease minimized or eradicated in our state, and that should be their focus and continue to be their focus, not other agendas which seem to be creeping in the door. Lastly, we had a provision in here that seems like it should not have been controversial to anybody, cottage food, but this is pared back. We allowed shipping when it left the Senate floor, which I thought was a strong position, small, significant step for the small cottage food industry, the 7,000 or 5,000 licensees and more that continue to grow every year because of the popularity and the interest groups, everyone from Hmong farming to groups across rural Minnesota, urban agriculture interests really are blossoming with the cottage food industry we have in this state. And they have been asking us to be able to ship their product rather than have to always be the one delivering it. And we had that language passed through the Ag Committee, passed through the Senate floor, and the result is now it's pared back to shipping only pet treats. And members, that was not a huge change, but a significant change, and I wish we could have kept that in the final bill. I don't understand why the House would have had such a problem with that. And so, members, just those are some of my concerns and comments among the many good things that we talked about in the rural broadband. Those are some of the items that I did want to raise for concern.
Members, we're going to go to, I did send a message to Senator Dames. We're going to adopt the committee report, go to third reading, and then others can just speak if there's no motion to do something with the bill. I will put you on the list. Are you looking to send it back someplace or anything of that nature? Because we would like to get the third reading, and then you can talk as long as you like. But before that, Senator Kupik.
Thank you, Mr. President. Could I request a roll call?
Roll call requested, roll call granted. You want to speak before third reading? Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr.
Well, you know what? In fact, if we're going to do that, then I'm going to go to Senator Dames because he was actually the next person on the list. Senator Dames.
Well, thank you, Mr. President and members. I just wanted to speak briefly on the bill. I want to thank Senator Putnam for getting the bill through the process and getting it back to the floor with a pretty reasonable bill. There's some things in here that I wish weren't in here, but there's some things that could have been in here that I'm very glad are not in here. But I just wanted to, Senator Westrom did a good overview. I just wanted to touch on a few things. The funding that we have in here for AURI. AURI is an organization that has been doing a lot of research for agriculture and have helped provide plenty of new products to the marketplace. And so I was really glad to see that there was some strong funding for them. Certainly the meat processing piece is a piece that's I'm glad to see in the bill. And along with, there's a lot of things in here to help beginning farmers, and I think that industry is getting tougher and tougher for young people to get into. And so anything that we're doing through the Department of Ag to help these folks get into that industry certainly is very helpful. There's some agricultural grants in here that can certainly help in a lot of areas. Some of the things I'm a little concerned about is the PFAS. Also, as Senator Westrom talked about, the Board of Animal Health, I think it's unfortunate that keeps getting watered down and less tuned into agriculture. Also, I was a little concerned, and I am disappointed that the wild rice research was taken out and we couldn't get that back in a conference committee. But with that said, all in all, I feel it's a good bill. I will be voting for it, and just wanted to thank Senator Putnam for getting it to this point.
Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I did vote for this bill going off the floor the last time. I was hoping it would come back a little better than it has, because of some of the provisions in here that Senator Westrom had talked about, and it's something that I've seen in the bills going forward, and in so many of these bills, and that is we're continuing to move away from the legislature making these decisions, and here now with the fee increases and the other stuff in here, that the commissioner now is going to be able to make these choices apart from the legislature going forward. There's two things. One, we're once again abdicating our authority, but also we're not giving a chance to the people this is going to affect the most a chance to weigh in on it before it happens. And when the commissioners can come in and make these choices, this is just, I just once again will reiterate, I don't think this is even constitutional. I can't vote for that. Even though it may seem small to you, it's a huge deal. The PFAS is also concerning when you're looking at, by the time this thing goes into effect, and 2026 is 3 years, we're actually 2 years away when you consider that the farmers are buying their seeds now. Already been informed by some of the folks over in the valley that if some of this stuff goes through, they're just going to go to North Dakota and buy their seed. People are really getting fed up with what goes on down here that's affecting rural Minnesota, and they don't. Our voices are kind of not being heard. But with that, Mr. President, I have a couple of questions for Senator Putman, if he'll yield.
Senator Putnam, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Putman, can you tell me how many new FTEs are in this bill?
Senator Putnam, to the question.
In terms of additional ones or ones that are, sorry, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Green, for the question. I mean, is the question about additional lines or pre-existing ones that have been shifted in different directions? I mean, clearly that complicates the issue significantly and makes any kind of precise answer difficulty. I would say it's clearly just a couple at best.
Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let's just go with the new FTEs, Senator Putman.
Are you asking Senator Putnam
Yes,
to yield?
if he will yield.
Senator Putnam, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Putnam, to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Green. My best estimate would probably be 2, maybe 3.
Senator Green.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. If he will yield again.
Senator Putnam, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Putman, what will the new FTEs be doing? What's the job of them?
Senator Putnam, to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Green. Someone smarter than me just told me it's 3. So we do know it's 3 folks who will be hired by MDA right now. One of them, I can tell you, actually, which should appease some of the anxiety that we've heard in this room about the PFAS legislation, is one of those individuals is someone who's going to be hired to study PFAS and to find the path forward. I think it's important that we realize, in contrast to what we've heard so far, this is not just designating tremendous authority to the commissioner, it's giving him the resources to understand something. So one of them, most definitely, is the individual who will be doing this study for PFAS. The other, I believe, is a climate coordinator, Senator Green, and that individual is not what it might sound like. The climate coordinator is someone who doesn't decide our weather. That would be Senator Kupek. This is someone who actually negotiates with the federal government, trying to find resources that can help us out in Minnesota. This is someone who works with the federal government to get us resources to help farmers here. Those are 2 of the FTVs that I know offhand right now, Senator Green. I can look into the third one for you if you still want me to know.
Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Putman. The third one is a full-time emerging farmer outreach coordinator, and all 3 of these new FTEs are going to be performing duties that are already being performed. So apparently we're expanding somewhere and either taking the responsibility away from other agencies or we're going to be growing government again. I just have a couple more questions if the Senator would yield.
Senator, will you yield? Senator Putnam, he will yield. Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Putman, I'm assuming you got the bill in front of you, and on page 24 of the bill, this isn't it says the Board of Animal Health, and there's close to $14 million appropriated there, but underneath it only gives probably $1.5 million of where $1.5 million of that money is going to go. First of all, the $170 million per year, or excuse me, $170,000 per year. So I'm wrong on that. $170,000 per year for the increased costs. And I don't know what the costs are now, but associated with importing companion animals from parts of the world with a high prevalence of animal diseases. Can you explain what that even is?
Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Green. First, before I get to that question, I was wrong earlier. It's 4 individuals have been hired in terms of FTEs, just to be honest. One of those is additional international trade support. So you are, in a sense, correct at that dimension, Senator Green, in that this is another person helping out with the job that we're already doing. But members, do you realize that? In the state of Minnesota, given the power of our agricultural economy, that for years we have only had one person trying to sell our soybeans around the rest of the world. So yeah, it might seem like we're duplicating government functions, but we are actually expanding our capacity in that circumstance. Now, to your question about the Board of Animal Health. Actually, I'm a bit confused, Senator Green, if I could. I'm looking at page 24, and I don't see anything along the lines of what you're talking about. So could you redirect me to where I'm going?
Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Senator Putnam, I printed the bill off of what was on the came across on my computer as the conference committee report, and so if I've got the wrong version of it, I apologize. But there is on page 24 of the version that I have, section 3. The Board of Animal Health, $6,771,000 the first year, and $6,931,000 the second year to the Board of Animal Health. And in that, it specifies that there's $170,000 per year to cover the increased cost of importing companion animals. And so maybe, if it is the wrong version, hopefully this isn't in here anymore, but it must be somewhere in the bill. So, Mr. President, if Senator Putnam would yield again.
Senator Putnam, will you yield? He will yield.
Thank you, Mr. President. And so, are you familiar with the fact that the bill is proposing to spend $340,000 for the increased cost of importing companion animals that may be from parts of the world that carry animal diseases?
Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Green. Unfortunately, you do have an earlier version of the bill. We're looking at page 25 in the most recent engrossment. So I apologize for my earlier skepticism, but that's where we're supposed to be. The question that you're asking, though, is an important one, and one that initially might cause a little bit of confusion. But there are other countries that have rabies. There are other spaces that have rabies. These monies are for quarantining animals when they come here so that we can make sure that they're healthy so that they aren't bringing diseases into our country and our state to mess with our pets. That's what those resources are for, Senator Green.
Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm aware of that, Senator Putnam. But the issue is, why are we allowing animals from other countries that have these diseases into the country at all? And so if this is increased cost, that means it must be increasing. So that's something I'd like to look into. But then again, the one last question then, Mr. President, if he would yield again.
Senator Putnam, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Putnam, there's a couple places in here where there's quite a good chunk of money to the Board of Animal Health, and I'm assuming it's just for their operating expenses. But here, when it talks about the Board of Animal Health, we're giving them nearly $14 million, and it doesn't really tell what it's for. So is that just for additional operating costs and what is in the rest of the bill? And then do you have a total of the operating costs that we are giving to the Board of Animal Health?
Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Green. I think there might be some confusion on the relationship between base and additional funding. We are not putting a tremendous amount of new money into the Board of Animal Health. And when it comes to the question of the Board of Animal Health's actual duties and why we are allowing Spot from a different country to come in here and be a puppy here. That's not our decision. That's the decision of the professional healthcare professionals, animal professionals who are on the Board of Animal Health. So if this is a concern, Senator Green, I'm glad that you likely also then support our addition of a companion animal vet to the board, because that's the person who's going to be making these decisions. Now, when it comes to the actual disposition of the resources for the Board of Animal as a whole, Health as a whole, they do lots of great work. And especially now that we've seen potential signs of avian flu in the state of Minnesota, this is not the time to cut back our investment in those folks who help keep our livestock safe and our farmers with profitable businesses.
Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. Those long answers to a very simple question. I wasn't criticizing. I wasn't suggesting that we don't do this. I was wondering what the money is for, if it is just for operating, because there is other additional places in the bill for operating funds that we don't know where they're going. There's no specification. It's just an amount of money. But I don't have any further questions, Mr. President. We're going to get really long because the answers are long and tedious. But the issue is, back for the bill again, one of the most important things that I think in the bill that doesn't seem big is the fact that we're giving away authority to the legislature. And it's unfortunate because I like the ag bills, and in Minnesota I think that we have in years past and probably going forward could be spending a lot more money on agriculture in this state because we don't have a very big budget for it. But no matter what we spend on it, it should go through the legislature. We should be making the decisions and maybe vetting these bills a little more than we already are. Thank you.
Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too want to rise and point out a piece in this bill that I was hoping would be coming back from the conference committee. Senator Westrom mentioned it earlier, but the piece for cottage foods. Very disappointed in the fact that the provision for shipping cottage foods products got stripped all the way down to only the shipping of pet treats under this section is allowed. And I'm wondering if the author, Senator Putnam, would yield for a question.
Senator Putnam, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Putnam. Now, you know that we've been working on this provision for multiple years, and I've been the chief author on some cottage food pieces in the past, and we've continued working with some other senators here this year. And so we had an amendment that got put on in committee to help with this shipping piece for cottage foods producers, and it got bipartisan support in committee, got bipartisan support here on the floor, and this was the reason this was one of the reasons why it got as many bipartisan votes when it left the floor as it did. And your co-chair on the conference committee used to be the chief author of cottage food pieces when I was trying to work on this issue in past sessions. And this comes dramatically pared down to an extremely low and practically insulting level of what's here in the bill before us. Can you speak to what happened in the conference committee and why we are not able to retain the Senate position on this issue?
Senator Putnam, to the question.
Mr. President, Senator Matthews, thank you for the question. I expressed my disappointment, my regret, and my own frustration to Senator Liskey about this, and I hope he understands that there's sincerity behind all three of those things. And as you may recall, just a couple weeks ago, when we first heard this bill, and we talked about cottage food industries, I said clearly, and I'll say it again, I am deeply committed to fixing this problem by working with all of the stakeholders. I have already had conversations about continuing these conversations this early summer. So this is something we are still going to work on. And to answer your question more directly, Senator Matthews, I'm sure you are aware of the complexity of internal negotiations in conference committees.
Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, I don't doubt the sincerity, but just stating, well, there's complexity in negotiations is a non-answer to the question. And the fact of the matter is these cottage food stakeholders have been told by the agency that we'll keep working on this, and that's been the same message now for all 7 years that I've been a member of this body. And to have the same answer just getting repeated over and over again, when it's very simple, very common sense solutions that we're looking for, that apparently, and I'll take your word for it, that Mr. Chair was in support of, to not have it come back in this bill is just extremely frustrating, especially when there's an acknowledgement of why it's okay for shipping of pet treats, but it's not okay for the shipping of the vast majority of the cottage food products that are produced. I just did a quick search right now on my phone, Mr. President. You can buy a whole bunch of the same types of foods that a lot of cottage producers make and sell. You can buy them and have them shipped to your house on Amazon through a big corporation. You can buy bread and have it shipped to your house. You can buy cupcakes and have it shipped to your house. You can buy regular cakes or specialty cakes. You can buy cookies. All these things that these cottage producers are seeking to do themselves, create their own goods in their own homes. These are businesses for single moms. These are businesses for people of color or immigrant communities in the cities. I've met with many of these folks and have spoken with them. They want to be able to do the same thing that big corporations and everyone else can do. And the fact that the agency keeps being a stick in the mud on this issue is just baffling to me. And the fact that we can't get enough legislators to get behind these people and help get these common sense solutions into the bills that actually get passed off this floor is disappointing. So I hope that you do keep working with these stakeholders, although it's the same thing that they've been told for at least 7 years in a row, and it's time to get these things done. Thank you, Mr. President.
Seeing no further discussion, the Secretary will take the roll on adoption of the committee report.
Mr. President.
Senator Liskey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, will Senator Putnam yield for a question?
He will yield. Senator Putnam will
Thank you, Mr.
yield. Senator Liskey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Senator Putnam, I've seen and we've talked about at length some of these cottage foods things. As Senator Matthews has already pointed out, a significant amount of my concerns with this bill. The only question I have is, did we leave the events change that we had amended in committee, did we leave that in there off of the conference committee?
Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Liskey. Honestly, I'm going to have to check it out real quick. Mr. President, Senator Liskey, I believe that change was made earlier in the process and would still maintain. The only changes that were made were about shipping specifically. So that's my best understanding and best memory, Senator Liskey.
Senator Liskey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Putnam. That's good to hear because that was another big part of the push. Obviously, I would have liked to get my entire bill into this bill here, but the fact that we're questioning shipping, questioning certain things, it does have me concerned. Senator Matthews brought up a great point of 7 years is an awful long time to continue to tell them we're going to work on this. This has been something that I've been taking up and working really hard on this session, as we both know. We've had lots of conversations about this. So with that, that was why I supported it on the way out, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to support it today on its way back going the other direction. Thank you.
Any other discussion? The Secretary will take the roll on adoption of the committee report for Senate File 1955. Members, please vote. Senator Murphy, for those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Bolden votes aye.
Senator Bolden votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Dietzick votes aye.
Senator Dietzick votes aye.
Senator Fateh votes aye.
Senator McQuaid votes aye. Fateh votes aye. I'm sorry. Correction. Senator Fateh votes aye.
Senator Mohammed votes aye.
Senator Mohammed votes aye.
And Senator Herr votes aye.
Senator Herr votes aye. Senator Jasinski, for those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Draheim votes aye.
Senator Draheim votes aye.
Senator Nelson votes aye.
Senator Nelson votes aye.
And thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
And Senator Miller votes aye. Senator Howe, are you planning to vote? Senator Howe. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There being 49 ayes and 17 noes, the committee report is adopted. The secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File Number 1955, a bill for an act relating to state government, establishing a budget for the Department of Agriculture, the Board of Animal Health, the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute, etc.
Third reading. Any additional discussion? Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chair Putnam. It was a pleasure working with you through the committee process. I just want to highlight a few things that I really appreciate about the bill. Growing up at a dairy farm, I really appreciate the support for the dairy farmers. Being there's only 2,000 left in Minnesota, or maybe just a little bit under. And when I grew up on the farm, there was about every section there was a dairy farmer. So things have changed a lot. So thank you for that. And the other one, the small meat processing, the funding for that. We definitely need to support our businesses and appreciate the funding for that. And also, I just want to talk about AURI a little bit and the funding you have for them. I had the privilege of serving on that board for a couple years, and I know Senator Putnam is now serving on that board, and what a great group they have. And especially I want to appreciate Dan Scogan and Shannon Schlick that running that smoothly for many years and the great work they do, and best wishes to Mr. Scogan as he is going to be retired, and just there's a new administrator taking over that duties. So with that, I just want to give him the best as he gets to retire. And it was great work with them, both those two, and learned a lot about what they do in the support of business and in the agriculture business. So with that, Mr. President, again, thank you, Chair Putnam.
Any other discussions of Senate File 1955 as amended? Senator Putnam, any last words?
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you all for the vigorous discussion today, one that I hope we will continue. I want to take a moment to thank Team Ag over here. Everybody stand up. Come on. They are awesome, and they've been incredibly helpful, and some of them are hiding. But you all know that we don't get this stuff done unless we do it together. And I want to thank Senators Dornick and Dames, Anderson and Westrom, for the spirit that they brought to the work that we did over the course of this session. This bill isn't perfect, but it's pretty darn good. And it makes me ambitious and optimistic about the work that we're going to keep doing for the next couple of years, as long as we put Minnesota's farmers first. This is the ag bill. We work for the ag community. As I've said before, no bill was heard in our committee if someone didn't talk to farmers before they brought it to us. So I look forward to reading your future work in the years that come and continue to do the kind of balanced, thoughtful, focused, farmer-centered work that we did on this bill. And that's not just me saying that. Ask our friends in Minnesota corn. Ask our friends in soybeans. Ask our friends in various environmental groups. They will tell you this is a good bill, if they haven't told you that already. And the fact that we were able to get all of these different interests on the same page and appreciate the work that we've done, I think implies that you should appreciate it too. Vote green, vote for farmers, vote for bipartisan work together to make things better.
The Secretary will take the roll on final passage of Senate File 1955 as amended. Members, please vote. I'm now going to Senator Murphy for those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Bolden votes aye.
Senator Bolden votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Dietzick votes aye.
Senator Dietzick votes aye.
Senator Fateh votes aye.
Senator Fateh votes aye.
Senator Mohammed votes aye.
Senator Mohammed votes aye.
Senator Herr votes aye.
Senator Herr votes aye. Members, please vote. Senator Kunesh, are you going to vote? Senator Jasinski, for those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Draheim votes aye.
Senator Draheim votes aye.
Senator Miller votes aye.
Senator Miller votes aye.
And thank you, Mr. President. Senator Nelson votes aye.
And Senator Nelson votes aye. Is Limmer coming? All senators having voted who desired to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There have been 49 ayes and 16 noes. The bill is passed and its title agreed to. Senator Murphy for a motion to recess. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I call for a recess to the call of the president, and we'll reconvene at approximately 5 o'clock.
On that motion, Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was just going to announce that the Senate Republicans will be caucusing at 3:23.
Any other discussion? Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Conference Committee of State and Local Government and Elections will meet at the call of the chair.
Any other announcements before recess? Seeing none, on that motion, all in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The motion prevails. The Senate is now in recess until the call of the chair.